All right, welcome to our podcast, Ways They Should Go. In this episode 21, we're talking about parenting and pride, mostly the bad kind of parenting pride. My name is Chris Evans, and I'm a substitute teacher here at First Baptist Church Ozark.
I'm Jeffrey Wolford. I am the pastor of adult discipleship here at FBCO.
In this episode, we take our Sunday school lessons from Sunday school, and we talk about how we can apply them as parents, and trying to figure out how we as parents can raise our kids in the ways that they should go, in the ways of the Lord, so that they will not depart from them, according to Proverbs 22:6. And we talked about how that's not a promise, but it is the way we should raise our kids. In this episode, so we talked about the Tower of Babel, and so we're going to talk about pride, particularly pride in our parenting, and a couple of examples of how we are prideful in parenting that maybe we don't realize. So,
well, I thought you might have gone teaching your kids to be bilingual with the Tower of Babel. But you went this way.
That would have been a great lesson.
It just hit me as you were talking. Sorry, I digress.
Yep, that would have been good. It is a good thing if your kids can learn multiple languages. That will probably serve them very well. So, talking about the Tower of Babel, were you in a Sunday school lesson?
I was not in an ABC Sunday school class. I was in a Lifeway Bible Studies for Life Sunday school class. So I did not sit in on any of these. So I'm coming in cold turkey. But we're talking about the Tower of Babel.
Yep,
familiar with that. And at the heart of the issue is the pride of man.
Yep,
coming together to do something. Pride that led to disobedience.
Yep. So we're going to take that lesson and we're going to apply it to parenting. But first, we need to make sure we have a definition of pride and then the opposite of pride, which is humility. So looking at the Tower of Babel as the example, taking directly from that story, I would define pride as when a human says, look what I can do, or look what I have done, and then also sometimes it looks like being angry that things aren't going the way I'm trying to make them go. So look, in the Tower of Babel, they said, they were building a tower. They said, let's come together and let's build a tower. And, I've got the story here. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed. And so, they're saying to themselves, look what we can do. We can build this great tower. We're so great. And then they start building it and they think, this part of the tower is so great. Look what we have done. And presumably, if they had finished building the tower, the whole purpose was to say to the world, look what we have done. And that's pride. When humans look to their own efforts, look to their own selves as good and great, and turn away from God and say, I can do this on my own.
So with the family, sometimes talking about pride within parenting, people can have this attitude of, look what I have done as a parent. Look what we have done. Look at our children. Look how good they are. And going back to Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, it won't stand. And so sometimes when we're parenting, and we're thinking about how to parent, we could become prideful in what we have done as parents, and so we've got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
We can say, look what we've done, and exclude the Lord. And we're going to talk about humility next, but just be careful. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you posting things that you're posting? Why are you telling stories about what's the stories that you're telling? Are you trying to build yourself up as parents, saying, look what we've done, versus look what the Lord has done?
Yeah. And I do want to make the distinction between a parental pride and a sinful pride. Because when your kid goes and does something great, they get that trophy that they've worked really hard for. It is right for us to be proud of them in that moment. And really, that is a different thing almost entirely. We do need to be careful. We can take it too far, yes, but really what we're saying in that moment is, I love you. You are a great person, and I love you. I enjoy when you are successful, and that's a good thing. Our kids need that from us, and I want to make clear that that's not what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I remember as a young man, I had a mentor, and I asked him this one time, because he was talking about how proud he was of his kids, and I knew it wasn't that first type of pride, look what we did or look what I can do. But I just remember asking him, I thought pride was bad. And he explained that very thing to me as a young man. He said, there is a good sense of pride. And it's not pride in the sense of look what I can do or look what I've done. It's a sense of pride that takes delight in the accomplishments of someone you love.
Yeah.
Having joy, finding delight in those things. And because that does make you feel good. When your kid does succeed at whatever it is, scholastics or athletics, just making good life choices. There's nothing wrong with saying, I delight in that.
Absolutely.
So, very good point. Very good point.
Absolutely. Yep. So then flipping to the other side, talking about humility. What is humility? Because humility is the solution to pride. It is the right way to be. Humility is, I like to think of humility as accepting who you are, understanding properly who you are. Romans 12:3, Paul is talking and he says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned." So he's not saying there, don't think highly of yourself at all. He's saying, don't think more highly than you ought, right? And he talks about the measure of faith that God has assigned. And then he flows right into talking about how we are all one body. Each member in the body has different purposes. And so I think when he's talking about that measure of faith, he's talking more about your role that God has assigned you, the gifts and abilities that God has assigned you. And, excuse me. And so that's what we need to accept. God has given you abilities and skills and ways that you're supposed to build up the body of Christ. Think of yourself that way, and that's who you are. And I remember being a young man, and maybe even before that, as a teenager, and thinking about humility. And it really struck me one day, like the way I tended to think of humility, and I think a way that we often do, is thinking less of myself. I'm not good. I'm bad. Trying to lower myself. And then I thought to myself, wait, God is humble, and that God tells us, I'm the greatest thing there ever is. How can that be humble? And that's where the definition of accepting who we are comes in, because God is the best thing ever. So when he tells you that's what he is, he's being humble, accepting who he knows who he is, and he's going to tell you who he is. And for us, we know we need to look at Scripture, and we need to understand what God says about who we are and accept that definition of who we are. Yeah. Any thoughts to add to that?
So understanding who you are as a parent, you have to understand the fact that God is God and you're the parent. So there's lots of ways where pride can sneak in to parenting. And as we're talking about this more, we have to understand that God is the one who's going to work in our children's lives. God is the one who's going to do that heart work. Sorry if I'm tapping my microphone. But we learned yesterday in church, the part of the new covenant is, I will take out your heart of stone and put in a heart of... That's God's work. That's not our work as parents. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So that's humility. That's us as parent, applying that to parents, is we plant, we water. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. We do what we can to put our children into the means of grace whereby God will work in their hearts. So we do family devotions. We take them to church. We pray together as a family. But ultimately understanding that it's God who does the work in their heart.
Yeah.
God is the one who's doing this, and so we just need to keep that in mind. Understanding who we are and what role we play in our children's spiritual lives. God is the one who's going to take care of your kids. Sometimes it doesn't feel like ends are going to meet, and you feel like all this pressure to provide for your family. Ultimately, we know it's the Lord who provides, and so just trusting the Lord in those things as you're parenting, as you're providing for your family. That's something that I've had to learn too.
Yeah.
So just understanding, like you said, just understanding who we are, our role, God's role, and where we're to be, and not to elevate ourselves to the role of God.
Yeah. Or even above where we're supposed to be. If we don't go all the way to God's position, we just more than we are. Yeah. It's and it can present itself in subtle ways too. So we're going to talk about some examples that I came up with as I was preparing for this. And the most obvious example of pride, and we've talked about it before, we're probably not going to talk about it very long here, is not asking forgiveness for your kids or from your kids. When you make a mistake, when you mess up with your kids, you're angry with them, or you should have done the dishes and you didn't do the dishes. Whatever it is, you need to ask your kids for forgiveness, demonstrating to them that you're not perfect, and you're accepting that you're a sinful person, and you recognize that, and you need forgiveness for that. Because if you don't, then your kids will grow up thinking you think you're perfect, and you know you're not.
And they know you're not.
And your kids know you're not. But if you never apologize to them, you never ask for their forgiveness, you're effectively communicating to them that you're perfect and that you don't have any flaws, and they know you do, and they'll end up resenting you for that. And it's just not true, forgive. And it's demonstrating to our kids the kind of behavior, the kind of person we want them to be. So,
yeah. And it also produces self-righteous kids in the future. As far as, they're gonna take that pride, more than likely, and apply it and use it in their families. Unless God does a work. But that just it perpetuates. So
So we talked about that a lot before, and it's the most obvious example. So let's move on to another example. Being too critical of your kids. So I think this can be an evidence of a prideful view of yourself. And I'm not speaking to anybody else more than I'm speaking to myself as I was thinking about this. Often when our kids do wrong, it's because they haven't been taught correctly, or they have seen incorrect behavior demonstrated by their parents. So if your kid is doing something wrong, are they doing it because their own sinful nature, they're rebelling, or they haven't learned a lesson? Or is it because you didn't teach them properly that that's what they're supposed to do? I think of kids cleaning their room. If you don't take the time necessary to teach your kids how to clean their room, then you can't expect them to clean their room properly. And secondly, if your room's not clean, why would you expect your kid to clean their room properly? And so then a lot of times what happens is we'll just get angry. You didn't clean your room, and then we get angry, and we're very critical of them not cleaning their room, not recognizing that actually we're trying to be in control of the situation, and we're not doing the right things. And then another part of it is, that's the next point. I don't want to
let me speak to this about being too critical.
Yeah.
There is a sense in which we are to be critical of our kids in the fact that we are raising them, right? They need to know, hey, you have not met the standard here. Like we want your room to be clean. And so in our journey as parents, we have learned how to some things that you guys think that are big deals as young parents, as you get older, you realize they're not that big of a deal. But still, though, your kids, even at 8, from the very beginning, what does Pastor call them? Vipers and diapers. They won't clean the room. They will sinfully not do things, even if you don't. I mean, even if you can give them all of the training that they need, they're still going to do things sinfully. And so, I mean, it is good if a kid does something wrong. It's okay. You have to understand. You have to ask yourself, did I teach them? Do they understand? And then you have to go appropriately. But and I'm just free thinking now. But going back to the whole idea of being too critical, why are you being critical of your kids? Mm-hmm. Are you being critical of your kids because you want to have a certain status and you want to have a certain level of whatever, certain level of academia success? As a parent, are you more concerned with
your house to be this clean?
Yeah. Are you more concerned about how it appears from the outside versus you want to teach your kid, hey, we want to take care of the things that we have. We want to do the best we can for the Lord. Mm-hmm. So what is the motivation of your criticism? And then I really believe humility produces grace. When you're humble and you understand your shortcomings, you'll be more gracious to your kids. Dude, there's been so many times where I have gotten onto my kids. You use the example of cleaning. How come you guys can't clean up your stuff? We've talked about this a million times, and then I go to my bathroom sink. I haven't put away, this or that, or, I'll walk through the house and go, oh, my shoes are in the middle of the floor too. Mm-hmm. And so it does teach you to not, I mean, that humbles us, and God has a way of humbling us. But going back to what are you trying to, why are you being so critical?
Yeah, we need to, as parents, because this is that humility, right? As soon as kids are doing something wrong, right? Yes, it is our job to be critical of them, to say, you're not meeting the standard, as you said. But then we need to first, maybe not temporally, as in like this happens, and then stop and be like, we need to turn a mirror on ourselves and say, look, is there something I'm doing wrong first that's resulting in this behavior? What do I need to improve my parenting to help? Clearly, they've not learned the lesson. Is there something I need to do better first? Change the way I'm parenting before I then go forward and be critical of them. And I'm not saying you always say to your kid, you didn't clean your room. Hold on, let me go away and make sure I'm parenting you right and then come back and get onto you. No, you should get onto them right away. But we need to always be turning that mirror back on ourselves. Go into Scripture, look, are we the kind of parent that we should be? Because we're not often. And I think of Matthew 7:5. You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. And that's specifically regarding Christian brothers, but the same principle applies to parenting. If you're not working on improving yourself, getting rid of your own faults, you're not going to be able to properly teach your kids what they need to learn. So we need to be careful if we're too critical of our kids. Is it because of our own pride? Mm-hmm. Or are we being properly critical of our kids? And always reevaluating that.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I bet if you're too critical of your kids, there's going to be pride there somewhere directing that.
Yeah.
Yep. And pride of something.
You're going to be prideful somewhere. Mm-hmm. None of us have solved it entirely.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's an evidence of it. Mm-hmm. So another example of sinful pride in parenting is needing things to be perfect. And so the next example is presenting a perfect life. So we're not talking about like for external purposes, but sometimes we just have this like internal need that everything needs to go perfect. And a lot of times what it looks like, and I've gone through this, I've done this, is it looks like we think and say to ourselves, why me? Why can't things go right just once? Or why is life is so rough, and our kids are misbehaving, and our spouses, we just look at their issues and we think to ourselves, oh my gosh, and we're so busy, and we think, oh, life is just hard. And I think what we're doing in that moment is we're saying, going back to the definition of pride, we want to say, look what I can do, and then we look at what is actually happening and we realize I can't actually do the things I want to do. I can't make a perfect family like I want to, and then we just get angry that it's not going the way that we want. And that's pride, right? Turning to myself, turning away from God and trusting in myself to accomplish what I want to accomplish. So we need to be careful about that.
Man, if there's one thing you're going to learn as a Christian parent, is there's no such thing as a perfect family. No matter how good they look at church, no matter how good families look on Facebook or Instagram or Snap, whatever it is, we're all sinners trying to figure this out. And so though we're striving for Christ-likeness and though we're striving for perfection, humility understands we're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Understand your kids are not going to be perfect. Understand that they are going to cry and make and fuss during church in the middle of worship. Understand they will do these things. And pride says, my kids are making me look bad. Mm-hmm. Pride says, why can't my kids be as good as me? The Lord's convicted me over the years as far as telling my kids, listen, your kids are going to do something that you're going to look at and say, I would have never in a million years thought to have done that. It never would have crossed my mind to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And as I've said those things and now those words have come out of my mouth, it's, well, now I'm holding myself up as the standard, not Christ, and having to be humble about that and going back and asking for forgiveness. So I'm going to encourage parents, let go of this idea of perfection. Let go of this idea of having the picture perfect family. You want to have a good family. You want to have a family that honors the Lord. And that's our goal, a family that honors the Lord, not perfection. Does that make sense? It's just...
And a family that honors the Lord doesn't have to be a perfect family. Mm-hmm. It's a family that relies.
It won't be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a family that accepts its failures and trusts in God to, one, save them, and two, sanctify them, and be their strength and be their hope. Yeah. And the thing that they cling to together as a family, the center of their life.
You're going to work through the office visits at school. You're going to work through the anxieties that come to your kids. You're going to work through the emotional, hormonal changes through puberty and things. You're going to work through those things. You're going to work through bad decisions, given into peer pressure. You just work through those things with grace and humility. Once again, holding up biblical standards and good discipline versus grace, and with grace. And when Jesus came to us, he came to us full of glory and grace. We speak the truth in love. Those are the principles that should guide us, and humility promotes those things. And pride does not.
Being talking about being humble and accepting your position and your responsibility. Your responsibility is not to create perfect kids. Your responsibility is to honor God. And he has given you kids. They're not yours, they're his, and he's given you the responsibility of taking care of them. And so your job is to honor God by being the best parent you can be. And really, that's it. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a complex thing to do. But in that sense, it's simple. Your job is not to control your kids or control your own life, but live a life that is honoring to God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like this last one you put on here, presenting a fake life on social media.
Yeah, social media is probably
or Christmas
the way.
letters.
Yeah. Social media is probably the easiest way that it happens today.
Yes.
But you were talking about kids in church. It happens in so many subtle ways. Social media is a really obvious example. We see other people posting great things about their family life, and we want to share the great things about our family life. Mm-hmm. And so even if we are in our own life humble in the sense that I accept we're not a perfect family. I accept that my kids are going to cry sometimes and we're going to make mistakes and our house is going to be messy and blah, 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 all these things. But then you post something on social media, you really need to think about why you're posting it. Are you posting it to say, look how great we are? Because you could say, yeah, secretly in our own house, we're not great. And when we go to Walmart, we're not great. But on social media, we look great. And my friend posted this picture about his kids doing this great thing. I want to make sure that they know my kids are doing something great too. And it can be easy. I pretty much avoid all of social media for personal reasons. So I don't struggle with this, but certainly in church, my kids are sitting with me and I'm trying to teach them to do what's right, but I know a lot of times I'm saying, shh, be quiet, because I want other people to think I'm a good parent. And I'm working on that. But that, there's other places that you're at Walmart. Are you worried about your kids misbehaving because you're trying to teach them, or because other people are going to think you're a bad parent? And I know we're all guilty of that. We need to be aware of it in all those different ways.
Yeah, going back to that first thing, one of the first things we talked about was pride being, look what I can do, look what I have done. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's what we're talking about here with this false perception, or giving this false perception of what you are as a family, and that's why community is important, because real, true community and body life, we all understand we're sinners. And we're trying to figure this thing out. Right? Yeah. We're all broken families. We're all dealing with things, and we're working and we're walking through these things together. Yeah. And
I think about sitting in church, and whenever I see some other parent and their kid is doing something crazy, I never think, oh, they're a bad parent. I always just think they're being a good parent, teaching their kids. Their kids are here in service, and they're teaching their kids, and their kids are going to take a while to learn. And that's how I think of it. And I think understanding other people aren't judging me as a parent can help us not be so prideful, not be so concerned about it. Understand that everybody understands what's going on, right?
Right.
So.
Yep.
So what's the solution? Let's talk about all these problems. And then we talked about a lot of solutions, but let's go back and remind ourselves of that. Solution to pride is being humble, accepting your position before God, what He has done for you. We're steward of all that He has given us. We're not perfect. We're sinners. We rely on Him every day, on His grace and His mercy. And that's it. That's who we are. And that's the kids we want to raise, and that's the family life we want to encourage.
Yes. And so at this point, I would just say, as you think about being a parent, a Christian parent, raising your kids, there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to build a godly heritage of I want to have a godly heritage of children who love the Lord and who have children who love the Lord. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. I talk to people who do have godly kids and then godly grandkids, and there is that. But where we can go awry, and what we need to protect against is, look what I've done.
Yeah.
Look, I want to build something for my name's sake, where people will remember the name of Wolford. They won't remember it anyway because it's a difficult name and no one knows how to pronounce it or spell it. But
I have you in my phone as Wolf Feet. Because I typed it wrong the first time and I never changed it.
So where's the heart? Where's your heart? What are you wanting to do? Where are you wanting the glory to go? And just remember that it's good to pursue godliness, but not from a heart of look at me. And that's where you get the idea of Pharisees. Look at me. I want to worship. When I worship, look at me.
Yeah.
When I do this good thing, look at me.
Yeah. We need to understand we're failures. We're not going to get it right. So when we accomplish something, we say, look what God has done.
Yep.
Not what we've done. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you for joining us. I hope that it was helpful. If you liked it, come back next week. We'll be here next week.
Mm-hmm. Lord willing, the creek don't rise.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, you can email us at waystheyshould@gmail.com, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.